Who should the elderly live with? As we journey into the twilight years of life, a profound question lingers in the minds of many. Where should we live to find peace, happiness, and fulfillment in our golden years? Is it best to follow tradition, moving in with our children and grandchildren, or should we carve our own path, maintaining independence as long as possible? These questions aren't just about where to live. They reflect our deeper values, family, dignity, and personal happiness. In the stories that follow, we explore different paths seniors have taken, each offering a unique perspective on the balance between family ties and independence. These stories provide insight, encouraging reflection on what it means to live a truly fulfilled life in old age. The first story, living with your children. My parents, Jane and Richard, were a beacon of tradition in our family. They always believed that the best way to enjoy their twilight years was surrounded by family. Like many parents of their generation, they saw living with their children as the natural progression of life. My younger brother, Jonathan, shared this view, and when he married, it seemed like the perfect opportunity to carry on this tradition. Jonathan's wife, Caroline, was carefully chosen, not just for her love and compatibility with Jonathan, but also for her harmonious relationship with our parents. Caroline's kind nature, strong family values, and domestic skills aligned well with what my parents believed would foster a peaceful, multi-generational household. For a time, everything seemed idyllic, but life, as it often does, unfolded in unexpected ways. While the initial years were peaceful, the generational divide between my parents and my brother's young family slowly began to widen. My parents valued traditional customs such as sitting together for meals every day, believing this to be a cornerstone of family bonding. But Jonathan and Caroline, caught up in the demands of their careers and social lives, found this practice difficult to maintain. As busy professionals, they often skipped these meals, opting for quick, on-the-go dining instead. To my parents, this felt like a rejection of everything they held dear. What began as subtle disappointment soon grew into frustration and resentment. My parents saw their lifestyle slipping away, while Jonathan and Caroline felt the weight of expectations that didn't fit their lives. And then Caroline became pregnant. The birth of their first child, Oliver, brought joy to our family, but also exposed deeper conflicts. My mother, clinging to her long-held beliefs in traditional childcare, often found herself at odds with Caroline's more modern, science-based approach to parenting. What started as small disagreements over feeding schedules and sleep routines quickly grew into a full-blown clash of philosophies. Caught in the middle, Jonathan struggled to mediate. He loved and respected his parents, but he also needed to support his wife, who felt increasingly overwhelmed by the unspoken pressure from my mother. The tension in the house grew palpable, and after several painful arguments, Jonathan and Caroline made the difficult decision to move out. They sought peace for their young family, realizing that cohabitation with our parents had become more of a strain than a support. Their story is not uncommon. Living together across generations can sometimes lead to tension and misunderstandings, especially when deeply ingrained values and expectations clash. Yet, for some families, the multi-generational household brings joy, unity, and purpose. Mr. Douglas is one such example. He and his wife live with their children and grandchildren in a large, bustling home filled with laughter and love. Although they maintain separate kitchens, every evening the entire family gathers around a long table, sharing meals, stories, and the ups and downs of life. For Mr. Douglas, the sight of his children and grandchildren under one roof brings a sense of contentment that nothing else could replace. "My greatest joy," Mr. Douglas often says, "is knowing that I'm here to watch over them, to offer advice, and to help when needed. There's peace in knowing we're together, For him, living with family offers a sense of security and connection that he treasures as his health declines and his social circle narrows. Yet he recognizes that this setup isn't for everyone. Proximity doesn't always mean closeness, he reflects. It's the love and care that matter, not just living in the same house. This insight touches on a deeper truth. The desire for family closeness is universal, but the ways we achieve it can vary. For some, living with children brings comfort, while for others, independence is the key to a peaceful life. The second story, finding comfort in independence. Henry and Elizabeth, a couple who raised 2 sons in the quiet suburbs, surprised everyone when they chose not to live with either of their children as they grew older. Both of their sons, Mark and Daniel, lived close by in the city, and many assumed that one of them would take their parents in, especially as Henry and Elizabeth entered their 70s. Yet the couple had different plans. Elizabeth had her reasons. As a young woman, she had lived with her own in-laws, an experience that shaped her views on family life. "It wasn't easy," she often said. "When you live under someone else's roof, even if it's your own family, there are unspoken expectations and tensions that build up over time. I didn't want my sons or daughters-in-law to go through that." When their younger son, Daniel, married, he and his wife were still saving for their first home. They asked to move in with Henry and Elizabeth temporarily, and the couple agreed, but with conditions. "You can stay for 3 months, Elizabeth told them, "but if you haven't bought a house by then, you'll need to find a rental." Some saw this as harsh, but Elizabeth explained that it was for the best. "Living together for too long leads to misunderstandings," she said. "Different generations have different lifestyles." Daniel and his wife eventually bought a home just a few streets away, and their elder son, Mark, also lived within 10 kilometers, making it easy for the family to gather frequently for meals and celebrations. Despite their close-knit relationship, Henry and Elizabeth cherished their independence. They wanted to maintain control over their own lives, even as they grew older. Elizabeth often said, "We're planning ahead. One day we'll sell this big house and move into something smaller, maybe a cozy apartment. If we need help, we'll hire it. We don't want to be a burden on our children." Margaret, a widow in her late 70s, echoed similar sentiments. She had 2 sons, both of whom lived in the city. They frequently urged her to move in with them, but Margaret was resolute in her decision to remain in the countryside, where she had lived most of her life. "I have friends here," she explained. "I enjoy the freedom. The city feels too rushed, too distant. People come and go, but here in the village, I know everyone. It's not that I don't love my sons, I do, but they have their lives, and I have mine." When she visited her sons in the city, Margaret often felt like an outsider. Their days were long and busy, filled with work and responsibilities. Even when they were home, the interaction was brief. A quick greeting, perhaps a shared meal, before they retreated to their computers or phones. "I'd rather they live their lives fully, without feeling the pressure to take care of me," Margaret said. "When the time comes that I need more help, I'll hire someone. My sons can visit, but I don't want them to feel burdened." These choices reflect a broader shift in the way many seniors approach aging. The traditional multi-generational family model is giving way to a more individualized approach. Many seniors today are choosing to remain independent for as long as possible, preparing themselves for the challenges of old age with a sense of autonomy and foresight. They value the ability to control their own lives, even as they grow older, and see this independence as a way to maintain dignity and respect within their families. The third story, embracing senior living communities. Emily, a widow in her early 80s, made a decision that shocked her children. She sold her home and used the money to move into a senior living community. Her children had always assumed she would live with one of them in her later years, especially after her husband passed away. To them, sending a parent to a senior community felt like an abandonment of duty, a failure to care for their mother in her time of need. But Emily saw things differently. "I don't want to be a burden," she told her children. "You have your own lives, and I don't want to sit in an empty house all day waiting for you to come home. In the community, I have friends my age, activities to keep me busy, and I know I'm being taken care of." At first, her children felt guilty. They worried that others would judge them for not caring for their mother themselves. But as time went on, they saw how happy and healthy Emily was in her new home. She participated in group activities, made new friends, and had her meals prepared for her. She was no longer isolated in a big, empty house, but surrounded by people who understood her needs and shared her stage of life. Emily would spend the holidays with her family, but after a few weeks, she always returned to the senior living community. She often encouraged her friends to consider a similar path, especially those who were struggling with the challenges of living with their children. "It's not about abandoning your family," she would say. "It's about choosing a life that works for you and them." Samuel, a retired military officer, made a similar choice after his wife passed away. For years he lived alone in their rural home, but his children insisted he move to the city to be closer to them. Reluctantly, Samuel agreed. But after 2 years, he felt like he was living in a gilded cage, as he put it. The city life didn't suit him. He spent his days watching television, isolated from meaningful social interactions, while his children were busy with their own lives. One day, Samuel watched a program about senior living communities. Intrigued, he decided to explore the option. After visiting a few places, he realized that this might be exactly what he needed, somewhere that provided care, but also offered the freedom to live his life as he wished. His children were hesitant, but Samuel convinced them to let him try it for a few months. To everyone's surprise, Samuel thrived. His health improved, and he found companionship in the community. He decided to make the move permanent, using his military pension to cover the costs. His children, initially unsure of the decision, were relieved to see him happy and well cared for. Samuel had found the balance he needed between independence and support. There was a time when sending elderly parents to a senior living community was seen as a sign of neglect or abandonment. But as the stories of Emily and Samuel show, this perception is changing. For many seniors, these communities offer a level of care and companionship that would be difficult to find living with family. What's most important is that seniors are content with their decision, whether they choose to live with their children, on their own, or in a senior community. Each choice offers its own benefits and challenges, but the key is finding what works for each individual and their family. The fourth story: navigating life after the loss of a spouse. Have you ever wondered how you would cope if you lost your spouse? The loss of a lifelong partner is one of the most profound and challenging experiences anyone can face. Life becomes a delicate balance between grief and survival, between holding on and letting go. But what if there were secrets to not just surviving, but thriving after such a loss? The stories below offer insights into how to find hope, independence, and happiness, even after the most heartbreaking experiences. Callista lost her husband when she was 64. For the first few months, she felt as though her entire world had collapsed. The man who had been her companion for more than 4 decades was gone, and she found herself alone in a home that felt suddenly too big, too quiet, and too empty. "I was like a shadow," Callista recalls. "I went through the motions, eating, sleeping, doing chores, but I wasn't really living. The nights were the worst. I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, crying myself to sleep because it felt like half of me was missing." But as the months passed, Callista began to reflect on her life. She would sit with old photographs, remembering the joyful moments she had shared with her husband. "I realized that he wouldn't want me to live like this," she says. "He would want me to keep living, to find joy again." Slowly, Callista began to rebuild her life. She joined a community group for seniors, where she found new friends who had also lost their partners. She took up painting, a hobby she had long neglected, and started to find beauty in the everyday moments. Grief never fully disappeared, but Callista learned how to carry it with grace. She found peace in knowing that by living well, she was honoring her husband's memory. Amber, a widow in her 70s, also faced the challenge of starting over after her husband passed away. Unlike Callista, Amber initially moved in with her daughter, who had recently had a child of her own. Amber's daughter and son-in-law welcomed her into their home, grateful for her help with the new baby and household chores. "At first I thought this was the right thing to do," Amber recalls. "I had raised my daughter, and now she was raising her own child. It felt like the natural cycle of life. But over time, the situation became strained. Amber and her daughter had different views on how to run the household. Amber, who had lived through more frugal times, was careful with money, while her daughter and son-in-law spent freely, often shopping online for things that Amber considered unnecessary. "I would try to give advice," Amber says, "but it was never well received. My daughter started to pull away, and I realized that my presence in the house was becoming more of a burden than a help." Eventually, Amber made the difficult decision to move out and live on her own again. At first, she struggled with loneliness, but over time, she rediscovered a sense of independence. She joined a calligraphy class, made new friends, and even started traveling with a local senior group. "Living alone has its challenges," Amber admits, "but it also brings a certain freedom. I don't have to rely on anyone, and I've learned to enjoy my own company." Finding happiness after the loss of a spouse is a deeply personal journey. For some, it means embracing solitude. For others, it means finding new connections and communities. But what's clear is that life doesn't end with the loss of a partner. It can be the start of a new chapter, filled with opportunities for growth, healing, and rediscovery. Conclusion: the search for peace and fulfillment in our later years. The decision of where and how to live in old age is as complex as it is personal. There is no one-size-fits-all answer, and each path offers its own unique rewards and challenges. Whether living with children, embracing independence, or moving into a senior living community, what matters most is that each individual finds a sense of peace and fulfillment in their golden years. The stories of Callista, Amber, Emily, Samuel, Henry, and Margaret reflect the diversity of choices available to seniors today. Some find joy in multi-generational households, while others treasure their independence. Some choose the companionship and care of senior communities, while others navigate life alone, finding strength in solitude. But one thing remains constant. The pursuit of happiness, dignity, and peace is a journey that continues throughout life, no matter the age. By making thoughtful decisions about where and how to live, seniors can create a fulfilling and meaningful life for themselves, while also fostering positive relationships with their families. In the end, the choice of where to live is not just about physical space. It's about emotional well-being, family values, and the desire to live a life that brings contentment and joy. Aging is not the end, but a new chapter, one that can be filled with meaning, love, and fulfillment. If you find these stories inspiring and they motivate you to take action, please share your thoughts. Comment 9 if you believe in embracing independence and finding personal fulfillment, or 0 if you believe in the strength of multi-generational living. Thank you for your valuable time.